What is preventing people, in your opinion, from getting the things that they want in life?
Yeah. Man, it sounds cliche, but it seriously
We love a
is.
good cliche here.
It seriously is a mindset. And this this just landed powerfully. Like, I'm 32, and somehow for 31 years I just didn't really realize this, but it just hit me like a freight train at the beginning of 2024. And it has just rocked my world and changed everything since then. And it is the realization that the people that have something that I want, that I don't have and I wish I could have, they are not different types of people. They're not in like a separate category, and that's why they have that business. The wealthy, successful entrepreneur, the guy with the six pack or the amazing, fitness. It's not that they have better genes. It's not that that person is smarter or more advantaged or whatever. And people do start with different skill sets and different toolboxes, but it it is the thing that separates those people from me is action.
Mm,
It's where the majority of people would look at that outcome and say, I wish I could have that.
okay. Yep.
Everyone else says, I wish. And those people said, I will.
Hmm.
I will. I'm going to do XYZ. And they just took action on those things that produce the outcomes. And action is just the only thing that counts, the only thing that actually makes the difference and actually gets you there. And if you were to do the exact same actions, if I were to take the exact same actions, I may not get the exact same results, but I would be in a very similar place.
Mm.
And so I think just so many of us go through life and we look at people around us on social media or whatever. And I know comparison is just this big thing, but comparison it's not always a bad thing. It can be a really good thing. If you go, hey, instead of saying, oh, I wish I had what that person had,
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
you just said, hey, if that person can attain that, then I could probably attain something similar if I could break down and do the exact same things that they did to get there.
Right.
It dawned on me when I had this. I had a friend of mine who's a very wealthy, very successful business owner. He's built a national franchise, and now like his kids are my age running the thing, and it's incredible the legacy that this guy has. And I had him over and his wife over to my house for dinner, and his son is a good friend of mine, so we had all of them over for dinner, and I
It's
was
not
like,
the owner of
really, like,
Five Guys by any chance, is it?
no, it's not. No, he's
Because you
like,
were saying this, and I was literally thinking about a podcast about the owner of Five Guys, and I won't get too much into it, but his kid's running now. But I
yeah,
mean, he's who I thought of because I was like, you're listening to this podcast. It was on the How I Built This show. I don't know if that's still around, but I was like,
yeah,
listening to that podcast, I was like, this guy has literally done everything wrong, and he
right.
still succeed. Like all of these just terrible bad decisions over and over and over again. But he did one thing right. He made a great burger, and it
Yeah.
was just hilarious, right? And I'm sitting here, and I'm going like, he might be one of the dumbest, most successful people I've ever met in my life or listened to. So it kind of
So it
got me
wasn't that
thinking of
he
that.
was smarter than everybody
No,
else.
absolutely
It
not.
was
And he
just where
admitted
everybody
that.
else said, "Oh, I wish I could do that." He just kept doing things and actually taking action, and then he ended up, eventually,
Right.
eventually, if you
Eventually.
you keep taking action, like results will come. And that was the thing that dawned on me as I had this successful guy over, and I was kind of intimidated. And as we hung out for the evening, as we ate dinner, and as we spent time talking about their family and their kids and their and life and how he got started in business and just all sorts of things, because he started this business that's now huge. He started it back when he was like in his 20s and first married and all that, and talking to him about that, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, like, this guy that I've been so intimidated by, like, when I sit down and have a meal with him, like, he's not like more like this super genius kind of guy. Like, he's an average guy.
Puts his pants on the same way you do.
He grew up in an average family. It's not like he came from some successful like wealth and whatever. He was just extremely disciplined, and he was action biased to where he just said, instead of like everybody else saying like, oh man, I wish I could do that, like, he just was like, I'm going to do it, find out what happens. And I think so many of us, we kind of wait for permission from people. to like go do things. Like we're waiting for someone to tell us that we can, instead of just going after the things and going like, hey, if that person can have it, I can too.
Yeah.
So I'm good.
No, I think that's great. And the reason I wanted to ask you that is because you've recently made a pretty big career transition. And, I want you to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that we're seeing as a huge trend, both with the people that I work with in my mastermind, we're seeing this on a national level, more and more people, especially high performers at pick your position, right, are looking to either start their own business or do some type of fractional work in their industry, different things like that, because they're realizing that there's a bigger payoff doing it that way now. And technology has enabled us to be so much more productive, than we could have been even 5 years ago. So, the potential for earning, even as like a one-person business, is so high. So, talk to me a little bit about, what that transition was like. What made you, whether it was, through this conversation or multiple conversations with this guy, what made you go from like, yeah, I'm just going to do this 9 to 5 thing to taking a chance on yourself and doing what you do now?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride this year. Some of it has been my decision. Some of it has been other things that have happened, but all of it, I think, is the same thing, and it all adds up to the same point. So that conversation, that moment where everything kind of crystallized for me, and I sat down with that guy and I said, I want to have what that guy has. I want to build something that I can hand over to my kids someday when they're my age. Lord willing, that would be the dream. And, I had the opportunity to work for my dad. He was self-employed through most of my growing up years. And I had the opportunity to work alongside him throughout most of my high school years.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was so cool. It was so cool. And I've only now started to realize how much that served me as I got my own career and my own life. And so I'm like, man, and now I've got kids. My oldest is 4. So I've got, little kids right now. I'm like, man, if I start now, over the next 10 years, like I could build something that by the time my kids are old enough to work, like they could work alongside me, maybe even younger. And so that was like, it just crystallized in my mind at the beginning of this year. I said, that is the thing that I want. And like you said, the clarity and the direction, like I think we were talking beforehand off the camera, but the clarity and direction that people often lack is the thing that they most need, and that everything follows that. And like, that's what you help people with.
Mindset is one of those things that you listen to a lot of the greats when it comes to this motivational stuff, the Dean Graziosis, the Ed Milet's, all these guys, oh my gosh, Tony Robbins, like, these are all, people that are focused so much on mindset. And I think sometimes when you get into a little bit of that self-help, that self-improvement world, whether you're reading the books, watching videos, podcasts, whatever, I feel like it can start to become a cliche. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I need my mindset. And I know for me, one of the things that I struggled with, I was like, okay, look, I've got the mindset. Like, okay, that's there. But I'm a really dumb dude. And I'm just like, what do I do next? It's like, how do I actually, like, okay, I know what I want, all these other things. I've got the clarity, but like, how do I actually go about getting that? Talk to me a little bit about how, from a very tactical perspective, what happened right after you get the clarity? Because that's the first thing. Yeah. You have to because action without clarity just makes you a rudderless ship. You're going to do a whole bunch of things and you're going to make no progress because you aren't the one driving in any particular direction. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, I use this weird analogy. It's like if I were to drop you in the middle of a jungle with a massive sword, that called capability. And it's like, okay, you're a capable person. You're good at something. You're ready to go do whatever. And you just start hacking a path through the jungle. Well, guess what? You're going to end up all over the place. It's like, but if you have a compass and you know the direction and you know the destination is, 1,500 yards away kind of a thing, you are going to get there so much more quicker and efficiently. And you'll know when you got there on top of it than if you just were like, okay, we're just going to figure this out as we go. And it's like in business, to go into business without a strategy, without, metrics, without, some type of like defined plan,
Yeah.
Everybody would laugh at you who's ever been an entrepreneur or in business leadership or anything. They'd be like, what are you talking about? But it's like, isn't that how we live our life?
Yeah.
And that was the thing that I struggled with. I'm like, the mindset's there. I've got it. What do I do next? I know I want to accomplish this thing. I literally don't know where to start. So I like bridging that gap for people and helping them kind of get these small wins. So what did that look like in your life when you were like, you had that moment of clarity? I want to build something that if my kids wanted to do it, I could pass it along to them. I want to start building backyard sheds like the one, if you're watching this on the video, if you're looking in the back, this is literally the product that he's talking about.
Home gym
or backyard shreds. I'm sorry, I forgot the R. It's brilliant. So it's like, talk to me a little bit about that journey of like that initial transition from having the clarity of what you want and then actually taking some of those first initial actions to go about getting it.
Yeah. And I wish that I could say, man, I have this just brilliant, like clear plan, like all written out for how this is going to go. But you like you said, like, I think a lot of us, like, we don't live our lives that way. And while I do think clarity produces better action, I think action from inaction produces clarity. Mm-hmm. And so that first step to me, and that's why I say the first step for me was going from inaction to action.
Absolutely.
And so it was basically the first step for me was a commitment to say, I don't care what it is, but I am going to start something this year.
Okay.
And it may not be the last thing, but it definitely has to start somewhere, and it has to start now. And so the first good idea, like the first decent idea I have, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take action on it.
Okay.
And that was sort of like the seed for me. And so the whole Backyard Shreds like brand and idea really started from, I would like to say, like my own cleverness and everything, but it started from a typo.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, I was working, and the idea for the product also kind of just was born from my own experience, but it started from a typo. I was texting a buddy of mine as I started working out in January in my home gym shed. It was less finished than it is now, but I was working out and I posted some stuff on social media, and I was texting a buddy of mine, and he said, "Hey, how's it going working out in the shred?" And I was like, "Dude, that's awesome. I'm going to call this the shred from now on." And I posted about that on social media, and a friend of mine on social media was on LinkedIn was like, "Bro, shreds are like, that's such a cool like idea and like cool like brand, like Backyard Shreds. Like, think of all the things you could do with it." And that just like got the wheels turning.
Okay.
And I was like, "Dude, yeah, for real." And he was like, "No, really, like you should start a business around that." I was like, "You think so?" He's like, "Yeah, like that would be awesome." And so then that kind of like that encouragement from a friend got me like thinking and starting. I was like, I went and like bought the domain, and I went and like, kind of got like some different things. And I had already like, I had built this 12 by 20 shed last summer to work out in and to have a home office in. And we needed more space. We just had our third kid last year. And so we were like, okay, I was my office was moving out of the house and turning into a new bedroom for kids, and I needed more space. And so like, I know there's lots of other guys in that space where they're like, they want to get serious about their fitness. They need more space, and maybe they don't have a garage, or the garage is not, ideal for their home gym setup. And I know I can help other people. And so the idea was like kind of formed from my experience. And I think there was also a book, Key Person of Influence, I think is what it is, by Daniel Priestley, that was really influential for me too.
Okay.
Where he was basically like, a lot of his premise there is that like most people, especially if you're in your 30s or 40s, you are sitting on a wealth of knowledge about something that other people would pay you to learn.
Yeah.
And that simple premise was like, hey, what do you know a lot about that you could charge money for helping other people with, right? And it's just the whole idea of like, you can create like intellectual property around that thing that you are good at and know about.
And sometimes you don't even know a lot. You don't even need to know a lot about it. Like, I think sometimes one thing, going back to the initial question, is that people are like, well, I'm not an expert in anything. And I go,
Exactly.
you don't necessarily have to be. You just have to be further along the journey and have an understanding of how something worked to get you there to be able to position that. And there's a saying I kind of came up with that, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, whoever you're talking to, that's your audience. And your audience is dumb. And the reason that I position it that way is because I'm not calling the people in your audience dumb necessarily, but I want the mental framing for you to be that my audience is dumb. So I need to speak to them like they don't know anything. Because I know for me, there's things that I want to talk about that are like the more complicated stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I think that'll hit really well with my audience and be relevant. And then the feedback that I get from people that have followed me for a long time, that are even in my mastermind, that have done like all the things, they're like, oh, dude, when you said this, like, oh, that just like a light bulb went off for me. And I'm like, that was like the most basic thing. Like, what are you talking about? I gave such better advice, in that YouTube video or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, no, it's like there's a reason that NBA players still practice layups, right, even though they're freaking NBA players. There's something about the fundamentals that is always powerful in anything that we do. And we can't get away from that when we're trying to teach people things. So if you
take those things for granted.
Exactly. The things we take for granted are pearls of wisdom that somebody else is going to love. So remember your audience is dumb and talk to them as such. And then if you do that, you will find that, they are going to appreciate it and learn a lot faster. And then you can monetize, like you said.
And you can monetize. And that's exactly what I did, because I realized I post a little bit about, hey, here's what I'm doing. I built this shed. I'm working out in this shed. And it's awesome, and I love it, and here's all the reasons why I love it. And then I kind of had that hook of like the backyard shreds thing, and so as I was posting about it, just people were commenting like, dude, that's amazing. I want a backyard shred. I would love something like that. I would love something like that. And then, have those influences from Daniel Priestley and other type of books and things content I was consuming, realizing like, hey, like, for example, when I built my shed, there was a guy who had a YouTube video just showing how he built a shed, start to finish. And that YouTube video got like 2.5 million views over the course of 2 years.
Wow.
And in that YouTube video, he just few times said like, hey, basically, if you want to build something similar to this, I have building plans for this exact shed that you just watched me build over on my website. And they're, $40 or whatever. And so I did the math and I was like, 2 million views. Okay. So even if his conversion rate's like, 0.1% or whatever, like $40 per person for a product that he spent, maybe a couple of weeks on building, but then it's there and he doesn't have to do anything.
And he was building it anyway. Yeah.
Download. It's just a free download at that point that just, there's no work to fulfill those orders or anything.
Right.
So that's why I love like the digital IP, concept is just, it's so easy to fulfill once you put the work in on the front end. And so I was like, I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to I want to leverage my skill as a communicator, and like I love talking to people and being on camera and whatever. So I'm gonna build YouTube, and I'm gonna start there. I'm gonna start with just teaching people what I know, which is building home gyms, sheds. And if you're building a shed specifically for a home gym, there are some specific building requirements that you might need that make it different from building a normal shed. And so there are some unique questions maybe that you would have. How do I build the floor so it's really strong? How much space do I need to fit different types of equipment and different things like that? And so I was like, that's my niche. That's what I know. Those are the questions that I had. I'm going to build the resource that I wish I had 12 months ago that I would have paid, $100 easily.
Absolutely.
Time and money it would have saved me if I had this resource. And so that was kind of the starting point. And then, we're branching out into doing some coaching and stuff as we're talking to more dads. But that was kind of where it started. And I was like, and then I told my friend, and this is to bring it full circle. I told my friend, this was within a matter of days. I kind of wrote out a business plan of okay, this is what I'm going to sell. This is how I'm going to promote it. And this is sort of the brand Backyard Shreds and what it'll be about. And I bought the website domain and some other things. And then I texted my friend and I was like, dude, Backyard Shreds, I love it. Thanks for the idea. And that's so clever. And he texted me back. He was like, oh man, that was a typo. Sorry. I was like, oh well, I just went and started a business. So here
And
we
how
go.
a typo became a business. I mean, I
Yeah,
think we
yeah.
found the
So
title for this episode right here.
part of
That's
it. Yeah.
amazing. Let me ask you this, because I want to throw some excuses out. So this is great, Cody. Okay, you got the plans out there. You started this business, but clearly you knew how to build things. Was your dad like in construction and all that? Like, I mean, I don't have any construction experience. Swung a hammer to hang a couple pictures sometimes, but that was about it, right? Talk to me a little bit about the background here. Because I'm just getting like, okay, so this guy was just in construction or something, doing this stuff all his life, and now he just changed what he's building. Is that your story?
No, in fact, I worked for a concrete crew when I was like 18. That's the extent of the construction experience that I have,
Okay.
really. And that was mostly just raking concrete and sweating a lot. So there wasn't a whole lot of like real building experience. The biggest thing I had ever built prior to building this 12 by 20 like tiny house basically is a chicken coop, and that's
Okay.
it. So, and so it was like a 6 months of tons of research and YouTube and going down the rabbit hole. And I've always kind of fantasized about like building a house someday, like building my own house. It just seems like such a satisfying thing. And I realized I'm like, this would be such a cool project to learn how to do some of these fundamentals. And if you can, I truly believe if you can build a shed, like you can pretty much build a house. Like the basic framing techniques and everything that you learn from building something like this is translates into something bigger like that. And
Okay, so I just posted about this today, actually. This is actually really relevant. So I post one of the things that I find when is a mentality, especially when people go to college. But I mean, even if you didn't, you graduate high school, it's kind of the same thing. But when you graduate college, that is the end of your education being reliant on somebody else.
Yep.
Now your education for the rest of your life essentially shifts to you. And most people are really ill-equipped to be able to handle that, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe you get some on-the-job training, or, maybe they'll send you to a seminar, every once in a while, or you have continued education courses. But it's like, that's more just doing like a job function. It's not developing a skill. If you want to get promoted, what knowledge or skills do you need in order to be able to get to that area? How do you network? Like, there's all these things that nobody teaches us. And that was where I was telling people, it's like, look, when you know what you want in life, okay, build your own college and, find the teachers or the coaches, find the books or the curriculum or whatever you need in order to go make it happen. And, so you're sitting here and you're going, yeah, I raked concrete. Okay, that takes like 5 minutes of on-the-job training. So that wasn't like any part of like a true skill you levered to build this up. Concrete dries fast. That's about it. So the excuses are melting away a little bit here. Tell me how you went about building this curriculum, for lack of a better term, to learn how to build, let's call it a mini house, because that really is what it is.
Yeah. So I few different pieces here. And first of all, I want to say that video that you mentioned that you posted the other day was absolutely brilliant. And I love what the points that you made in that video so much. Like that it resonated with me so deeply. And I think anyone listening to this podcast needs to go find that video. On your social media?
Yeah, on LinkedIn. Yeah.
LinkedIn. Go check out that video on Stephen LinkedIn, because it is, I think if people really grasp a hold of that concept, it transforms like everything in their life.
Well, the internet has 99% of all human knowledge pretty much available to it. So I think we used to think that giving people knowledge would enable them to do things, and now that's pretty much been debunked. It's like, knowledge is no longer the problem. That's
lack of information is not the thing that's preventing people from getting what they want.
Nope. It's right? Action. Like you said,
it's action. Is right. It's so all the information's out there. Like I learned, people ask me, they're like, how did you learn how to do that? Like, did you know how to, like you said, like, did you have construction experience? I was like, no, like YouTube. How do you know how to do anything? Like, YouTube. It's all the information is there. The thing is, not all the information is organized Not all
Yes.
the information is relevant. And so that's why I was like, okay, I'm going to take months of research and condense it into one download that people can download. If they want to do exactly what I did, then I'm going to fast forward them and just, for one click, one download, they can have all the information that they need that's relevant to what they want to build, which is a home gym shed. And so there were some other like shed building plans out there. And I'm convinced whether or not you want to use a backyard shed for a home gym, like that's kind of what they're designed for, but they work great for like a home office or a studio or whatever you want to use.
Yeah, it's a mini house. Like you turn in whatever you want.
It is. And I'm convinced. So I also don't believe that you have to completely recreate the wheel. Like so many people are so hung up on originality that they're like, well, I don't have these original ideas. Like, it doesn't matter. Go find something else that somebody else has done and make it better.
Yeah.
Make it unique to you. And so you don't have to recreate the wheel. So I went and I looked at a bunch of I downloaded a gajillion different building plans for sheds on the internet. And I was like, well, I really like the way that this building plan, like, kind of explained this particular step, but man, they really suck on the rest of this. And they left out a really big piece that people need to know about, or vice, and kind of took the best pieces of everything plus my own experience. And I was like, I'm going to build the best building plans on the internet for home gym sheds, but for any sheds, honestly. And, I spent months putting these things together, not only months learning how to build my own shed, but then months putting this resource together to make sure that it's, really, really the best.
So I want to come up with another excuse here that I think I hear a lot anytime it comes. And again, for those of you listening, like we're talking about sheds, okay? But we're not really talking about sheds. We're talking about, or shreds, I'm sorry, in this scenario. But it's like, what we're really just talking about is, again, he had a goal. He had clarity. You knew this is what I want to do. I want to build something. And then you got more clarity, because a lot of times that's the thing. It's like you may have a moment of clarity, but when you really start to focus on what that is, it's just like your eyes adjusting to the light after you've been in a dark room. You will continue to see better and better and better as things adjust when you focus on something. And that's what happened to you. You had a moment of clarity where you said, I no longer want to do what I'm doing. And what were you doing at the time when you had that moment of clarity, by the way?
Yeah, so I was working as like a head of customer support in a tech company.
Very, very relevant to building sheds, like we said. So you learned so many things from that job relevant to this. Exactly. So it's like, so there you are. You're working at a tech company, desk job, staring at a screen all day. Okay, and then you have this moment of clarity of, okay, I know I want to start a business, to potentially hand down this legacy to my kids if, they ever want to have a part in that. Okay, great. But you still didn't know what you wanted to do. But you just said, I'm going to do one of the first things that like really kind of comes up and give it a shot. And then as you had that initial moment of clarity, as you continue to focus on it, when the opportunity came, you were ready. And you said, okay, backyard shreds. That's the idea. That's what I'm going to start doing. So then you had a new level of clarity. You went from wanting to start your own thing to this is what that thing's going to be. Then you had to move to your next level of clarity, which was, well, how do I actually do it? And this follows the 3 questions of lifestyle design. Lifestyle design is about what do you want? Why do you want it? And how are you going to get it? So the first thing was, what do you want? And you said, I want to start my own business. Okay. Why do you want to do it? Because I want to have a legacy for my family and I want to give myself the opportunity to grow beyond my limits, essentially. Putting words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I got there. Is that fair? Okay. Well, so, and then the next level of clarity was the third question. Well, how am I going to get it? And it's like when you can answer those 3 questions, it will change your life just like it did for you, because now the only thing that's left when you have answers to those 3 questions, what do I want, why do I want it, and how am I going to get it? The only thing that's left is action. Because you have at least, and again, it doesn't mean that you have this fully baked plan. What I do with people is we actually build a 3-year plan. But really all we do is we know exactly where we're going to be in 3 years. And then we work it back to literally the action we're going to take today. I tell people I give you everybody needs 3 tools to change their life. They need a telescope, They need so they can see where they're going to be in 3 years. They need
Yep.
a microscope so they can see what they have to do today to get a small win to inch them towards that. And then you need a financial plan so you know the financial costs that are going to be associated with this.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if you know the 3 years and you know the today, then you just kind of make a prediction for what the next 30 to 60 days look like. And you can make a pretty good idea of what those will be. It'll change a little bit, but not too much. And then you just move forward. You take that action, like you said, but it's action with a direction. And, a lot of worlds, we call that velocity. So, you want to make sure that there's speed, but that speed is combined with the right direction. So everything that you said, man, again, you and I have never met prior to this. So this is our first conversation, but that to me is why I see you being successful at this, because you followed those things. You designed the life that you wanted to have, and then you executed on it. And to your point earlier, that's all that your neighbor or your friend that you brought over that did all that, that's all he did, you know? And he's just continued to do it over a long period of time. So I think that's just some really great advice. I want to go back a little bit, and I want to know, when you did work with your dad, because it sounded like that planted the seed a little bit, what is not necessarily a skill, but what's a value that you kind of took from the time of working with your dad that has contributed to your success, thus far? Obviously it's a journey, but that has contributed to your success with Backyard Shreds, and one that you want to make sure that you pass on to your kids.
Yeah. Two things, Stephen. Two things that I learned from my dad about working alongside him during my high school years that I think have applied to every single job that I've ever had as my career has progressed, and has helped my career progress both in the corporate world and on entrepreneurship, because it's just work, and the same skills apply. But the two things, one is we work until the work is done. And some people would call that workaholic, and yes, you have to have balance, and you have to serve your wife and kids and not lose track of those other priorities.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so many people, especially on the front end, before they reap the reward of hard work, they don't want to put in the hard work. They want the results of hard work, but they don't want to put in the hard work. And
right. Everybody wants the destination. Nobody wants the journey.
Exactly. And so, it takes hard work, and it takes a willingness to work until the work is done, and to really have grit and just say hey, we got to keep going. We got to keep pressing forward. And it is a struggle, and it does take effort. And so I remember, working with my dad, and we would work 10, 12, 14 hours a day on some of these big projects that we worked on. And it was dirty, tiring work, and just watching him work like crazy, and working alongside him and say, hey, it's not 5 o'clock, time to go home. And sometimes you can do that. But when you're really trying to build something, especially on the front end, especially if you're, maybe building a side hustle while you're working full time, there's going to be a lot of effort that you got to put in. You say it takes sacrifices to take work. And so that was one of the things of hey, we're done when we get these things done, because they have to get done. And his commitment to working hard really shaped me. Because I think if you have that attitude, you will stand out head and shoulders above 90% of the rest of employees anywhere in the workplace or in entrepreneurship or whatever.
Never seen an industry where effort was in short supply. I agree.
Yeah. It's not as common as you think, and so just that alone gives you a huge competitive advantage in any work capacity. But then the second thing was in entrepreneurship specifically, but it works in any job that I've ever had. It's just this mindset of, and this goes back to the video that you posted, I don't know, but I can figure it out. I think so many people are just trapped in this, well, I've never done that before.
It's a growth mindset.
It's growth mindset, right?
Yep.
I've never done that yet. I've never done that, but I can figure it out.
Just what you said right there. If everybody would just add that one word, it
Yes.
would it would change their life. Instead of saying, well, I've never done that.
Yep.
And you just said, I've never done that yet.
Yes.
Now what you have done is you have left it open to possibility versus closing yourself off from it.
Exactly.
And it sounds, again, we're back to mindset. Here we are again. But that's where it starts, because that's also where it stops.
That's what he did. Like, that's what he's done his whole life. And I've just watched opportunities open up for him in his career in entrepreneurship and all sorts of different really cool things that he's done, just because he was like, yeah, well, I don't know. I've never done that before, but I think I can figure it out. And they're like, cool. Well, and even entrepreneurship, like, this has been something that's really interesting. A lot of times, like you said, you don't have to be an expert. People have this false expectation that you have to be an expert at something in order to get paid to do it. It's not true. Right. You just have to be willing to figure it out, or able to figure it out, and find somebody who doesn't have the ability to figure it out and who wants to pay somebody, So like, I've had people pay me for stuff where I was like, you know what? I've made a pitch to them where I'm like, hey, I'm not an expert on this. Because I also have like a freelance, like I do media and like digital marketing kind of stuff with like building websites and whatnot. So I have like all that on the side as well. And like with that, like different, digital marketing, content creation kind of stuff. And people are like, well, have you done X, Y, Z? Like, no, I've done kind of adjacent things, but I've never done that. But I would love to figure it out, and I'd love to learn. And, I can figure it out and do it for you if you want. Like, oh, that'd be awesome, And you think, oh, I have to be an expert. No, you just have to be willing to like go learn. And again, if you have that mindset, you have that ability to say, I don't know, I've never done it yet, but I can learn it. That puts you ahead of 90% of the people, either in your office that you work at, or just in the workplace in general.
Okay. I love that. Look, I know we're coming up here, but I have to ask, you're wearing a shirt, Bibles, Barbells, and Babies. Okay. Speaks a lot to purpose in your life. We have a lot, we have a pandemic on our hands, honestly, a purpose pandemic. And unfortunately, we see this in the data of the world that we live in. Suicide rates continue to climb. It's heartbreaking that people just take their lives because they feel lonely or they don't see a point to their life or anything like that. And, you see it in the fact that we are so overly medicated. People, again, not saying that there's not a time and a place for, if you're on an antidepressant or something like that, but it's a Band-Aid. It's not the thing that fixes you. And, it's not the way that we're meant to live. And, so there's just so many things in this world. Just going to the statistics with men are opting out of dating. They're opting out of the workforce. They're opting out of all of these things. And, yeah, sure, maybe some of that's on them. Maybe some of that's on society. But at the end of the day, we are in charge of our lives. We are the ones that make the decisions for that stuff. And I constantly see a lack of purpose, a lack of meaning, being at the core of all of these things. Because there was a general that once said, you can give a regular man a mission and he will climb over glass in order to achieve it. And I believe that's true. I believe when we have a strong sense of purpose, that is the thing that will drive us. And that, for me, in my mastermind, we call that your why statement. What's your why? So for you, I don't know if you have, a clear sentence or anything, but it's like, what is it in your life that gives you purpose, that gives you meaning, that is, the ultimate driver, for all the things that you do in life?
Yeah. One word. As a Christian, as a follower of Jesus Christ, as a man who believes that I was created by God for a purpose, one word, I think, defines my why, and it's the word stewardship.
Great word.
Which is the concept that everything I have is a gift that I've been entrusted with. It's not mine. Mm-hmm. It's been given to me to make the most of.
Yeah.
And to use wisely, to invest and create interest, to make more of. If you're a financial steward with someone else's money, like, you want to be a good steward of that money. You want to make a good investment for that person as a financial advisor, right? You're stewarding someone else's resources. And that's what I think my life is about. And that's the whole thing with Bibles, Barbells, and Babies. It's my kind of fun, creative twist on, faith, fitness, family, right?
There you go. I like it.
And I, as a man, I want to be a good steward of the relationships I have, the kids that God has given me, the marriage that God has given me, the body that God has given me physically. That's why I care about fitness. It's not so much about vanity, about wanting to be buff or wanting to be sexy or have a beach bod or all those things. Like, those are great. That's fine.
Doesn't hurt.
Oh, it doesn't hurt. Hey, it's great. But I think so many dads are like, well, I don't really care about those things. So
yeah, they've already got the wife, they've got the kids. Why do they need a six-pack anymore? And you don't even need a six-pack to be healthy, by the way. So
but people neglect that because I think it's just about vanity. They think fitness equals vanity.
Yeah.
And no. So that's my whole thing, is like, it's stewardship.
Okay.
You have one life, you have one body. Are you making the most of it? Are you being a good steward?
It's such a fantastic word. I love that word. And I think I think that's not a word that culture uses very often, right? We're familiar with that as a fellow believer. We understand that word a little more just because it's used in the Bible often. But I think of the parable of, the master and the three servants. And he gives them all, the money to go invest, comes back in a little while. The first two are like, hey, I invested your money. I got something back. The third one was, well, listen, I was scared to lose any of the money. So I just essentially just hid it. Here it is, but I didn't do anything with it. And then he curses that guy. And I talk about the 4 types of wealth. And the 4 types of wealth are a lot of the things that you just mentioned, which is your time, your health, social wealth, and then your financial wealth. We are called, and I think that meaning in life is through being a good steward of all 4 types of those wealth. If you're a good steward in just one area of those 4 types, you only focus on the financial wealth, well, guess what? You're not going to experience the rest of it because you're not being faithful with the time that you have, with the people that have been put in your life, with, the body that you've been given. It's like we need to be good stewards of all 4 of those, which is exactly what I think so much of what your t-shirt and what you've talked about represents. So I'm a huge fan of that word, man. That's a fantastic one. So I'm going to give you the last word on this. Anything that you want to say, anything you want to mention, and just so people know, if you're interested in Backyard Shreds, you want to see a little bit more about this stuff, you can look in the show notes. I'm going to plug everything there. He's got a course coming out. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to get into that a little bit, but it's specifically for dads who want to shred the dad bod a little bit more, right? So all of this information is going to be down in there, but last word to you, anything that you'd like to scream from the mountaintops for everybody to hear.
Yeah. And it ties in with the course thing. So I am launching a men's fitness group. So it's group coaching specifically for dads who are passionate about Bibles, barbells, and babies. And maybe they've gotten off track and they want to get back on track and be a good steward of the one life, the one body that God has given them. So we're launching that in 2025 in January. Enrollment is open right now. Over the next few weeks, we've got, big things happening as far as discounts and Black Friday and all that kind of jazz. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that. But it all comes back to one single message of stewardship, which is that fitness is not something as dads that is a luxury. It's not something for dads that is vanity in itself. I think we think it's kind of like selfish for us to pursue those things. Like you said, we've kind of spent our whole lives kind of serving our families and serving our kids, and
this false sense of self-sacrifice, I think, can sabotage some of that. Yeah.
And I think people neglect fitness for that reason, because I think it's just vanity and it's just selfishness, and it's not. It all comes down to holistic stewardship of being good stewards of what we have. And so that's what we want to help dads with in the B3 Brotherhood, the Bibles, Barbells, and Babies. That's what we're calling it, the B3 Brotherhood. If people are interested in that, they can hit me up and I can give them more information, put it in the show notes. But I just want to encourage people however I can with those things.
I love it, man. Well, Cody, thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, man. Love it.